Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG Podcast. I am Ramon Mejia here to bring you less LitRPG news, reviews, and of course, this time an author interview. With me today is my buddy. He is a man who has written multiple novels, including a whole series of short stories. He has some very interesting superhero-themed novels. He has had many great reviews for his series. Welcome to the show, Jeff Sproul.
Hello. I'm Jeff Sproul.
Yep. He is Jeff. So there you go, folks. And now Jeff is actually here to promote his latest entry into his superhero lit RPG novel series, Sigil Online, called Hellions. And it's a very interesting story. He's also the author of the Permadeath Legacy series, Demons Bane, Grimoire Bound. But we're talking about Sigil Online. So Jeff, tell us a little bit about yourself first, and we'll get off with our interview questions there.
All right, so as you said, I'm Jeff Sproul, not actually my real last name, but I'm Jeff Sproul for author purposes. He already said what I write, so what do I explain here?
Just some background, man. It's okay. Like this is new for everybody. Sometimes when they come in, man, it really is just a conversation. So pretend like we were just meeting and you're introducing yourself as an author and like how you got into it.
Okay, so I've probably been, I'd say I kind of started really being an author about 4 years ago. I used to work as a tech support in one of those, dead-end tech support jobs. And so I had it was, third shift, late night, and I just started writing some short stories in my super amounts of, extra time, and kind of built that up and tested the waters and kind of started writing my first books from there. I've kind of been writing ever since I was around 14, just, little stories, really super poor grammar, that sort of thing. But in more recent years, I've gotten better and just kind of tried self-publishing on Amazon, and it seemed to work out pretty well. And here I am in 2018, and that's what I do now.
We'll see. There you go. Perfect. That's a great background information. I know you mentioned, though, that you also have a background in game design. Can you tell me anything about that? Sure.
So I'm sorry. I know we have a question that I think asks a little bit more about the detail of that. So, so I went to school. So I graduated in 2007, and I went to a tech school for the last 2 years of my high school, so 11th and 12th grade, and we were taught video game design for 2 years. And so half my day was separated into regular school stuff, English, math, etc., and the other half was video game design. And in my time there, I built essentially a browser-based RTS with spaceships and planets and colonizing, and I don't know how many players could play it. I was running it off a server at home at the time, and people could jump on. And I think one of my classmates ended up inserting some code that destroyed the tables or something. So it was really poorly optimized and not secure whatsoever. But I always figured I would get into game design, from my high school years of, oh, hey, what do you want to do after school? And I'm like, oh, I'm going to be a game designer, hands down. So I immediately after that got a job as a web developer. No game design stuff, just web developer. It was really boring, got laid off, ended up selling cell phones at AT&T, made some good money. And at that time I was playing Age of Conan. Met a guy, my guild leader. He basically flew jets in the Air Force. And he's like, oh man, the Air Force is great. I've got a house, a wife, 2 kids. I just fly jets all day. I'm like, man, Air Force sounds great. Let me get in on that. So I go up and join the Air Force. And I was in the Air Force for 7 months. I went in as explosive ordnance disposal. I failed that.
Oh, okay.
And
I was gonna say, that makes the explosions in your story sound like really detailed now.
Yeah. So we actually did get to blow some stuff up in EOD training, but I failed it. Anyway, so they reclassified me as electronic warfare, which is basically like radar, stuff like that. I didn't get too far into that because I failed that as well. But kind of failed it on purpose so I could get out at that point because I was like, man, this isn't working out. So I then tried actually passing the test, which I failed on purpose and missed it by one question. So I was like, man, I want to get out of the Air Force. No, I want to stay. And then it just so happened I ended up getting honorably discharged. And then I was kind of like aimless for a little while there. It was kind of like I didn't know what I was doing. So I started day trading, just stock trading for a bit there.
Did you do well? I mean,
well,
I'm curious.
It was 2008.
Yeah.
When everything had crashed.
Oh.
So I was buying low and really things could only go up. So I did really well for about a year and a half there. And then about 2010-ish, I got that tech support job.
And from there we went into writing. So
from there we went into writing.
They're perfect now. So that was a much more detailed. I
don't know what's
called the QC, a resume that I thought we'd get. But that's interesting background stuff because every writer is informed by the things that they've lived, and so to me, it's at least for me, anyways. It's hard to write about things that I've never experienced, whether it's in a video game or in personal experiences of life. Like a lot of my stories rely upon my stupid stories, the things that have happened to me, like the dumb instances, the relationships that I've had with different people. Those kind of experiential things. So that fact that you can bring anything from your life, whether it's going to be ordnance or electronic warfare or tech support, or in this case, LitRPG game design, is always wonderful to me, at least.
Yeah.
So
and of course, spread out through all that time was just lots and lots of video game playing.
See, there you go. I think that's the thing we both have the most experience in. Like I've never held a job for like 30 years, the same way that I do for video game playing. So that's probably the thing I draw the most on, which makes for good RPG mechanics and RPG stories, if nothing else.
Right.
Because you've had lifetimes of experience, playing video games and going through those storylines. But we're here talking about specifically your Sigil Online series. Tell me a little bit about what makes your Sigil Online LitRPG series interesting and different.
So with Sigil Online, I wrote the first one, I published the first one not last December, but the year before, so just a little over a year ago. And at the time, there wasn't any superhero LitRPG out there. So I wanted to make something that was a little reminiscent of City of Heroes, and a little bit more recent at that time was DC Universe Online. And you could play characters like that worked like Batman, Superman, stuff like that. And, you could just run across the city, fight NPCs and monsters and stuff like that. And I kind of took what I'd seen in City of Heroes / City of Villains and DCU Online and kind of incorporated some of those elements, but also elements I always like in games like Permadeath, where if you die, your character's gone forever. And another thing I always like to see, or I would love to see, I guess at all in video games, is a real world monetization tie-in, where if I have an item in a game, I can sell it, for real world money without it being, against the terms kind of thing. So
basically bringing the black market stuff into the light, because it happens anyways. Like nobody can stop any of that item trading. There's just like extra steps, like, I have to meet you in real life, and we trade gold for those items, but that gold can be purchased from like some other vendor, and it's just like a roundabout way of doing the exact thing that people want to do. Like the market always like defines what people are going to do, even in like video games, and in like your world. It's a little more straightforward, and more video games are actually doing the same thing. They're realizing that kind of transactional stuff is money they could be collecting, even if it's like as a tax or something.
Right.
So yeah, I love those aspects of your story. The permadeath one is definitely a hard sell though for a lot of gamers, because you invest 10, 15, 20, hundreds of hours sometimes in your character, and then bam, it's gone, and that's difficult.
I think so. Me and a lot of other people really love, I'm sure, Dark Souls.
Yeah.
So you have this character that you spend a lot of time grinding and leveling, and then it dies, and you actually lose I guess all the currency you built up, but you keep your items and things like that. But so my first MMO that I ever played was called Lineage 2. You die in that game and you may drop a piece of gear, but the idea of if I die in this game I lose everything has always kind of, I don't know why, it's just always kind of held like a little increased risk, in my opinion, for video games, especially and I guess a lot of that stems from the anime Sword Art Online, where they were all playing this game, and you learn at the end of episode 1, oh hey, if you die in this game, well, you're dead.
Right.
So I guess I kind of always want to include that aspect in my virtual worlds.
No, absolutely. And in Sigil Online, that's definitely a big part of it. Can you tell me how that plays into that mechanic specifically plays into the beginning of Sigil Online Book 1 Paragons? Because that's where this big story for your main character, Riley, starts.
Right. So in the first book, the protagonist, Riley, he starts out actually as one of the higher level people. He had been playing the game for just as long as anyone could have, and he was probably one of the top percent in levels, etc. And in very early in the book, he ends up getting killed, and which is really no spoiler because I'm pretty sure it says it in the description, and it happens chapter 1. And so he dies really early on, and this high level character has to go back and start this game from square one. Well, in a lot of games you would expect, oh, I'll just have my friends power level me or give me their gear, etc. Well, he didn't really make friends in his time in Sigil Online. It was like a job to him. So it was really coworkers that he kind of had to work with, essentially. And so he didn't really build that fan base that would have protected him. So he finds really early on that, oh, this is going to be harder than I thought. The game's different than it used to be when I was a scrub. And he gradually learns to actually make friends in the game instead of just, coworkers, essentially. So
the story's about the power of friendship.
The power of friendship, and kind of like a Captain Ahab story about him hunting down the thing that killed him.
Right. And so I think that's a really good start, because I mean, later on in the story, there was that same power curve, so he doesn't say or scrub the entire first book in the story. And they're like some of the unique things about book 1 in the series in general is the fact that it is superhero themed. So there is an entirely different progression system in this particular novel. So there are levels, and so their stat increases as the level, but it's the game progression is very different. It's item based. Can you tell me anything about that particular system in your books?
So when I thought about what would really make a superhero game pop, I guess, is, for superheroes, it's, what's that superhero's power? And in the Sigil Online game, players start out as, just a regular person. They don't have powers. They don't have anything. There's weapons they can buy, things like that. And but what the game does is it, I guess, distributes powers based on things you've done. So like, oh, you're, regular Joe walking down the street and explosion happens nearby, but you survive the explosion. And, oh, well, now you have like stone skin, and you hit what I call tier 1, essentially, of your powers. So you've got stone skin, maybe you can move rock or throw rock or turn into glass. And so I've got this dynamic power system that the game distributes based on essentially what happens to you. Maybe you found some
basically like superhero origin stories that have
exactly.
to occur for you to actually get superpowers. Like in your world, people start out as regular, almost NPCs. And they can purchase upgrades, or they can purchase items that kind of give them street level powers, the same way that you would for Batman, who's still a human, well trained, but he has cool equipment, and that's his superpower, money, kind of. But in your world, anybody can do that, but they have to have some event occur which gives them an actual superpower. And I think that's always cool. But also, one of the things that's also unique for your world is that characters can get by craft items that actually modify their superpowers as well.
Correct. So everyone gets their own origin story. Everyone has their own power. But the items in the game, I kind of tie in a little bit to items will give you like increase in stats to make your stats stronger, make you more resilient, make you more powerful, etc. But a lot of the items have, I guess you would just call them effects, such as increasing the amount of shots you can fire, reducing certain amounts of damage, or giving like how would you say it? I guess making your powers cooler, essentially. Let's say your power is, picking up a rock and throwing it. Well, you might find an item that increases that capability like 100%, or lets you augment your ability somehow. So I kind of took a page out of Skyrim's book, so that your items aren't always just giving you, stats to make you stronger. They're giving you boosts to your power. So
that's always interesting. Now, in book 2, we have Hellions. I also like to think of it as the Hellions expansion. How does book 2 change things in your story world?
So with Paragons, the first book, it's essentially a high-level person gets knocked down, and it's more of a PvE story, player versus environment, leveling up, getting back on their feet. When we transition into Hellions, the game has fundamentally changed in that players no longer just can start out as a average Joe NPC. They can start out as an actual monster whose job is essentially go hunt players. So I think it was Lord of the Rings Online allowed people to start as, a regular hero character or a monster. And so the idea kind of stemmed from that, I think. And in book 2, it's definitely more player versus player based. There's now reasons to form guilds, to fight other guilds, other than, kill somebody and obtain their loot. And so Hellions is definitely more player versus player. And we also learned very quickly that one of the additions to the Hellions expansion is pain in the game, which wasn't around in Paragon. So players have to deal with actually feeling pain when they go into combat, and that actually drives some players away while others kind of take advantage of the situation. So players can become monsters, pain, and lots of PvP.
So there we go. Those are the kind of the big themes for, like, as far as the game mechanics go for book 2. There are, of course, more interesting story concepts and plot ideas in book 2 as well that make it interesting as well. Especially, well, there's a very interesting end that might be controversial to some people later at the end of book 2. But I won't review the book now, but it is definitely a thing that'll make people's eyes pop, I guess, if nothing else. And of course, it leads in some very cool potential storylines for book 3. Whenever you happen to write that. So thanks for the information on your stories and getting insight into what the stories are about. Now, your main character in the story is Riley. So we're talking about a little bit of character development here for your storyline. Tell me a little bit about Riley, who they are, what makes them tick, why are they special for your story?
So Riley is essentially, he exists in a world that isn't too much like our own. Real world, but it has further embraced video games on a more, I guess, economic and wide scale. And he lives by himself due to the situation he's in. And so, like a lot of people, he's got to figure out how to pay rent, buy food, and, survive, live paycheck to paycheck, essentially. But he's, this 18-year-old kid, essentially. And he was in a situation with this high-level character that he didn't really need to worry about stuff. It's kind of like, I'm making 2 or 3 times, minimum wage. I'm doing good. I'm doing great. And then you get laid off. Well, that's essentially what happens to him in book 1. He gets laid off and he's got to go find, a minimum wage job or less to make ends meet. And so that's kind of like the general premise of, what it would compare to in a real world situation. But he's playing this video game as both a form of his entertainment and his job. And I feel like a lot of people can relate to Riley in that sense of maybe not, playing video games to make money.
I think we'd all love to experience that, like making your living doing something you actually enjoy. And I think as well as writers, we kind of have that that correlation between, like, I used to do this just for fun and now I had to do it for a living. And so there are some dynamics that change there in that your focus shifts from maybe solely entertainment to, okay, I have to take this more seriously and I have to actually be productive. But the fundamental concept, like losing your job, suddenly have to scramble to figure out how to make ends meet, is definitely something a ton of people can relate to in our current economics situation.
Absolutely. I mean, I've dealt with it myself.
Yeah. Like when you're telling me your story, I'm like, oh, so that's where this is coming from. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. I, right out of high school, I had got that web developer job and was laid off. And I was just like, well, I'm in a whole different area. And, what do you do? You look for another job, you move back home. What do you do? So there's plenty of people out there who know exactly how that feels. And I think can empathize a lot with Riley. And in his situation, it's play or die, essentially, is his mindset is, it's this game and making this work because he doesn't want to go do anything else. He doesn't, want. So that's, his situation and kind of how it evolves. And we learn in book 2 that his situation changes a little bit from simply trying to make it day to day, surviving on, what he makes from this game. And so we get to kind of see how that evolves a bit in book 2.
Right, because not only is he now taking care of himself, he's also in the game has an expanded sphere of influence, we'll say.
Right.
And he's trying to pull things together to improve his situation. Of course, his friends, because we've already said the power of friendship occurs in book 1. Yeah. And so you have to take care of your friends. And there are, of course, larger concepts that happen in book 2, both within the game and out of the game, which are interesting, to say the least. Okay, so that's a great insight into who the main character Riley is. Now let's talk about a few things in general. You write LitRPG, right?
Yes.
Okay. What is LitRPG to you, and why do you choose to write in that particular genre?
Okay, so LitRPG for me is essentially a story that it doesn't have to take place in a game. It can, take place in a world, and LitRPG is essentially a story that involves a character or characters that level up or progress in some way. But I like to think that LitRPG is definitely, they have, levels or at least stats that get stronger, but there's, numerous ways of going about that. In my Grimoire Bound book, I kind of go about it in hey, you're living in a world that is kind of gamified, where it's normal to level up and stuff like that. Whereas in Sigil Online, the protagonist Riley is actually playing an actual video game where he levels up. So I definitely think LitRPG can be a multitude of different things, but at the end of the day, it just means, progression and leveling up. And I think that can just be done a lot of different ways. But right now, I'm mostly writing LitRPG. And for me, it takes a lot of, I guess, my own experiences of, playing video games in general, just as my main form of entertainment. And, every game I play plants a little seed of a new idea of a story to write or how to modify things I've already written. So.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a cool thing that your stories in particular are doing. Basically, you're doing expansions for each new book. Like you're basically changing the way the game world works, the same way that MMOs do. And then a new expansion comes out, the rules change, maybe quest lines change, open up whole new areas of access to players to give them new things to do. And that's what you're doing from book 1 to 2, and also in the future book 2 to book 3.
Right.
So you're definitely, your work is definitely being informed by your experiences as an MMO player, and I can see that, I guess.
Yeah, we were discussing a little bit earlier, but I was telling Ramon how if anyone's played Star Wars Galaxies, that was a great example of how the game fundamentally changed with, one patch. I think it wasn't really well received, but the game, changed extensively with that patch. And there's been other MMOs. I mean, there's plenty of World of Warcraft players that are like, oh, vanilla was the best. All these expansions just ruin it. So you've got people who, with each expansion that comes out for a game, they miss how things were, and they don't always enjoy what has changed. And sometimes those games change on a very fundamental level. So I'm kind of incorporating that with Sigil Online, is that each one of these expansions is really changing up how the game works.
And I also noticed in book 2, you also opened up an opportunity for other game worlds, specifically.
Yes.
But it's not a spoiler. It's like a minor mention in the story. I think it's a space world. It's like a space game, though. So I thought that's also interesting. Do you plan to write a space genre lit RPG story that ties into this, like the same world? Maybe Riley goes on a space adventure as a short story or like a separate piece of fiction.
Well, so I kind of said earlier how this world that Riley lives in has embraced video games on a more fundamental level. And Sigil Online, while a popular game, is not the only MMO out there. Just kind of like how EVE Online, let's say, it gets 30 to 40 or 50,000 people every day playing it. It's very popular in that demographic, but it's not the biggest MMO out there. So in this situation for Sigil Online is just one of many games that exist in this world, and the mention of the space game is my desire to branch off another story within this universe. It may include Riley. It may include him as a side character with a different protagonist.
Yes, I do want
to keep I do want to keep that as something I want to expand upon with this world. I'm not going to say how many books Sigil Online is essentially going to last, but I definitely have other plans for the universe it exists in. One thing I kind of mentioned that no one's asked me about is in book 1, I'm pretty sure I mentioned it, the dungeon. So the characters talk about this thing called the dungeon, and it's very, very, very briefly mentioned. And one thing I wanted to do was create a sort of short story survival series of this. Essentially, the justice system and law enforcement use this dungeon to rehabilitate, and it's a virtual reality as well. And so I wanted to write a series based off that, but that's kind of been sidelined currently.
No, yeah, there's so many like cool story ideas that you can do with video games. Like I'm already imagining you taking one of your characters from Sigil Online. They quit the game for whatever reason, but they start up a new game, and a new one, a space MMO, where it's like spaceship, spider, survivalist, whatever it's going to be. Or like the other story you mentioned, like, oh, the dungeon, like, oh, there's a dungeon master story there as well. Or like, you're talking about criminal rehabilitation. I'm like, oh, so like the beginning of Way the Shaman, sort of, and incorporating it in a different style, maybe. I'm like, oh yeah, too many cool ideas.
Yeah, I love adding the possibility of expanding the world later, and so including those little nuggets now gives me something to keep in mind as I'm developing the core story arc. So
God, it's so hard though, because you have so many good ideas. You're like, no, but I got to finish this series first because there are people buying this.
The hardest thing is you have all these great ideas, and I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. You work on one and you love that idea, but it's kind of for me. I don't get writer's block. What I get is writer's grass is greener on the other side. And so even though I love a story and I like writing it, well, there's this other story I have that is really tempting to write. And that's kind of what happened with Grimoire Bound for me. Is I kind of wanted to write this kind of Lovecraftian horror lit RPG, and I kind of veered off onto that because I just had to write it. It was in my head. I had to write it. And now I'm back on Sigil Online, hopefully to finish out the series.
Okay, so are you at least doing like a 3-book arc before you go back to your other stories?
My intent is to finish Sigil Online in its entirety, whether that's 3, 4, or 5 books.
Oh, okay.
And then go back to either this space MMO or try and round out Grimoire Bound a little bit. I've got 70% of a whole nother kind of a game lit book on the side that has been written for like a year and a half now since I was working on Paragons, and it's just sitting there at about 70%. I'm like, we'll just leave it alone for now.
Yeah, I mean, if you can write like Michael Scott Earl or Michael Chatfield, where you're putting out like 10, 15 books a year, like, write whatever you want, as many novels.
Absolutely.
Like, that's like 3 or 4 series for some of us, like fully finished, like trilogies or whatever. But me, I'm like, I'm putting out, last trip put out, I think 3 total. And hopefully this will be more, but I definitely don't write like 10, 15 books a year like those guys.
Absolutely. It's a lot slower for me. On a good schedule, I tend to write, like for Paragons, I was up at the point where I was writing 5, 6, 7,000 words a day consecutively for about 2 weeks. So I was able to knock out Paragons relatively quick. Most of Grimoire Bound was written at about 3 to 4K a day. And then Hellions was kind of written out about 2,000 to 3,000 a day, because it seems like the more I write, the slower I get. But I just got to work at it a little bit more. So
yeah, it's hard to keep up the motivation for like the excitement of like, oh, I'm returning to this world. I have this amazing story in my brain. Sometimes I think, at least for me, you get kind of caught up in like, oh, I have to do this for a living. So there's like a little more pressure. At the same time, if you do this for a living, you have a lot of other things in life to do. Like there's less, nobody's forcing you to write anymore. You work for yourself. You're your own boss. And so the only person who's going to make you write is going to be you.
Yeah, that's that willpower to, consistently write every day, or, try and write every week or whatever it comes down to is, in the beginning, it's liberating. You quit your job, you start writing full time, and you're writing 5,000 words a day, 4,000, 3,000. And so, in my situation, I kind of a little bit more background on me, but I live in Alabama. I have my own home. It's a tiny home, 360 square feet. So it's not that big. For some people, that's their living room. And but it's all I need because it's paid off. There's no debt, so it's just me in there, writing, and it's great. That's what I wanted. That's what I worked for, is to be in that situation. And so I really don't have to do super well to make ends meet. But then in the back of my head, I'm like, you know what, Jeff, you ain't got to work today. You don't have to do anything today. There's this brand new game that just came out on Steam or PlayStation or whatever.
Monster Hunter came out finally.
Yeah, Monster Hunter World. I will be MIA for a good month. So I got to try and, work out some stuff before the 26th of January. So
okay,
yeah.
So as you write, so now that you're an independent author, you have your tiny home, it's all paid off. We'll assume your bills were relatively paid. What is your day like then? So you wake up in the morning and you kind of had to motivate yourself to either write or not?
So I kind of got to the point where I was tired of waking up to an alarm. So I stopped using alarms entirely. And because, it doesn't matter if I wake up at 2 a.m, 4 p.m, whatever. It doesn't matter. I don't need to be awake. So I don't use an alarm. My schedule kind of slowly rotates forward about an hour every day, or half an hour. And so my days are basically, wake up, get my coffee, chill for a little bit, and try and be like, okay, let's just, knock out these 2,000 words. But before that, I should play this game first to wake up. And then that usually becomes like a 6 to 8 hour activity. And then sometimes I will attempt to make sure I, knock out 1,000 or 2,000 words before going to bed. I think my best regimen of actually writing consistently was wake up, have my coffee and oatmeal, and screw around for 2 hours, play games, whatever. And then after that 2 hours, I have an alarm and it says, stop, screwing around. And then I do the work or whatever I wanted to set out to do, whether that was 2,000 words, 3,000 words, whatever. And that worked for a while, but then, it stops becoming consistent. So I tried something new. I tried going to a cafe like 12 miles away.
Right. Outside of your home.
Yeah, outside of my home. I went to a cafe with my Microsoft Surface, which I've now replaced with this laptop, which is a work laptop, no games. And so I'd go to this cafe, and this Microsoft Surface only has about 2.5 hours of battery on it. So I was limited in that aspect. And so I would go to this place, not use the Wi-Fi, just me typing in Google Docs. And I would generally get about 2,000 words consistently every day. And that worked great until they started doing construction on 6 miles of that 12-mile, drive. And I'd have to sit for like 10 or so minutes sometimes. And I'm like, man, I'm just going to write at home. And so that consistency fell and the word count fell a little bit. So I keep trying to think of like new ways to, have a good schedule to keep up with my writing. And it's just always changing. Like I can't keep with anything, it seems. So.
Oh gosh. Yeah. I talked to like Michael Scott Earl. He's like, I write 10,000 words a day. Easy. Sometimes 15,000 words for like multiple books. I'm like, wow, that's cool. But he definitely does better than I do. Let me see. Moving into a little more of the story structure stuff. Are you a pantser or are you a plotter?
So I love pantsing, but I feel that it's not a good long-term solution. So,
especially if you're writing a series, pantsing is harder to,
So Paragons was actually more of a pantsing, and it's just a funny word to me. So Paragons kind of had a very loose idea of what it was when I started writing it, and it kind of evolved a little bit as I wrote it. And that, I think pantsing creates snags that you don't really expect, but when you're writing a series, plotting is so much more strong for the storytelling, and being a pantser is fun because you learn a lot as you write. It's not, it's more of a sense of discovery than, all right, this chapter's this chapter's that. I got to hit these points, and you discover a little bit along the way between characters and chapters, but as much as, as it's not as much fun to be a plotter, but it's usually more consistent as far as having a good storyline.
No, I totally agree, man. And for the audience who doesn't know what this term means, pantsing is writing by the seat of your pants. It's not just pulling someone's pants down, although that can be fun too. Pantsing is like, and they were saying like free form writing, where you don't know what you're going to be doing, where the story is going to go necessarily. Like you just let your imagination go. You write your story. It goes where it goes. Sometimes to some very weird places and some really odd plot twists. And some writers can only write that way. Plotting, on the other hand, is very structured in that you have like maybe a whole outline of what your whole story is going to be. Like, where you at the 30% mark, you need to hit this point, and at the 60% mark, you need to hit this point, and there's a plot twist in the last 10%, whatever it is. And so you have like an outline for your story, and maybe like a super detailed one. And there's a whole spectrum of like writers who do, something in between. But you're right, man. Like, plotting is boring. I mean, it's not boring. It's less interesting because there's less of a sense of discovery. Like when I wrote Adventures in Terror Book 1, very pantsy. It was just like a thing that I did. It was the first thing I ever wrote, and so every day was kind of like a sense of discovery. And then I didn't know where the story was going to. It started out as a survival story where the main character was just rubbing sticks together, making a mighty horny spear where you attach like a rabbit horn spear to the stick, and that was it. And then it evolved into something I hadn't thought of when I started out, like this friendship story, finding friends and relatives, going to a dungeon, a bunch of stuff, murdering people, dying at the end. But as I figured out, I can do this for a living, I had to that means I had to actually create a story arc for a book 2 and a book 3 and like figure out like how these things are going to fit together. And so I've been transitioning into plotting more and more just because it makes more structural sense for my like math engineering kind of brain. But at the same time, I'm also like finding I'm less excited to write sometimes. Like it's harder to find that motivation to like start because you know where it's going to go. Like, you know how your story is going to end, and I know all my plot points in between. But like, yeah.
Yeah. It's like, you can still, have like a pant structure if, it's like, okay, my character's starting here in the world, and I know that by the end of the book, they need to, get to this point. Well, okay, that's all you need, and you can start, doing it by the seat of your pants. But it's like, and I do love, that method a lot, but, and I was going to mention this earlier, but like for like book 2, when you're writing book 2, things kind of slow down a little bit, and you kind of need that structure, especially because it's like, oh, you have all these continuity problems. If you're just writing a standoff book, you can do the pants situation, but if you're writing a book 2, it's like, all right, let's make sure that all this adds up. You got all this continuity, and so if someone's somehow writing series by the seat of their pants, I don't know how they're doing it.
No, well, one author in particular, I forget her name. It's the Paternity Online author, Dawn Chapman. Mm-hmm. She always tells me like she's a pantser. Like she's almost 100% pantser. She writes her stuff with her pants. She can't write any other way. But she did a series. She did like Paternity Online is at this point going to be a 4-book series when the 4th book comes out in February, and that's almost like a secondary spinoff. So I'm like, I don't know, I could do a pantsing series like her, just because structure to me is super important. Like I mean, just as like writing research, I've looked into like, oh, how do people make money from writing kind of books, and like write to market books, and most of them always emphasize like, oh, you should have like a 3, 6, 12 book series planned out in advance. That way you have a chunk of story that you can give to your readers, and that's how you make your money. Maybe you have a loss leader for the book 1 eventually, but there's a buy-in, and there's a whole industry around like writing and making money from it. Apparently it's not as easy for everybody as it is for LitRPG authors sometimes, because their audience isn't ravenous, or maybe there's just more stuff out there. I don't know. I can only write this kind of stuff. I couldn't write anything else, so I really don't know. But reading things, I'm like, okay, structure is important for some people, structure is in others. But like on a business sense, which is a whole nother discussion of like writing in business, and like planning it out in advance makes sense to me, even if it's not as fun, I guess. Before we get on, I have a quick question from the audience. Someone's actually watching this live, apparently. Okay. So that's fun. We have Jeff Thomas, who says, Ramon, your audio is cutting out. And then he says later, I think 3 or 4 books is enough for an author a year. How do you balance the impatience of readers to taking a little more time polishing a book?
So first off, your audio seems fine. It was crackling a little earlier.
There you go.
So repeat the question one more time.
No problem. His question is basically, how do you balance out your audience's desire for a new book, like pushing something out as soon as possible so you can fulfill that desire, versus waiting and taking extra time to polish your book? How do you balance out those two kind of concepts?
So the beauty of that for me is, while Paragon sold really well, from my standpoint, and people asked, when's the next one coming out? And I'd kind of planned it to come out in like February or March of last year.
Yeah.
I didn't really get a whole lot of people until actually just in the past 30 days being like, hey, where's, book 2?
It's been a year, isn't it? Like,
yeah, it's been a year. So luckily they've had plenty of other stuff. I mean, there's been a lot of other good stuff that have come out, other book 2s, 3s, or in certain people's situations, book 9s. So there's been a lot of other things to, keep people fed on LitRPG. So I've kind of been lucky in that regards that people aren't, ravenous for my next one. So I've been able to, relax. And I mean, I wrote a whole nother novel in between book 1 of Sigil and book 2 of Sigil. Probably shouldn't have, but couldn't get it out of my head, had to write it. So I did.
No, yeah, I feel the same way. Like I had to take a break between writing book 2 of Adventures in Terra and book 3, which is I'm doing now. just because I kind of got stuck in that I was finding it less entertaining to write. Like I put out a story outline for book 3, Adventures of Terra, but I'm like, I was finding it hard to be motivated to write again because I knew where the story was going to go again. So I took a break, wrote Project Alpha, which is out currently. I think the audiobook should be, hopefully, cross our fingers, being approved pretty soon for it. And that's just an entirely different world, entirely, well, maybe not too different of a main character, because again, they're all based on me and my experiences. But like the world is different, the experience is different. It's a modern setting. It's kind of dungeonizing in a modern world. It's very much like The Gamer or the stuff that Scotty Futch does in his multiverse, Scottyverse, where he like, especially towards the one he does for I forget it's called, the Galactic Fist something, where his main character has a hub, but he goes in different game worlds. I was very much kind of informed, like, oh, that's a really cool way of like telling like almost mini adventures. And so I in my world, in my story Project Alpha, they're just dungeons that exist in the world that a stranger group would have to find. But again, the point is that it's a very different story, and so that kind of helped me cleanse my palate a little bit. So that now I can come back to Adventures on Terra, and I'm genuinely a little more excited because I kind of forgot about what I was frustrated about, what I was, so yeah.
The term, cleansing your palate, cleansing your creative palate, I feel is kind of definitely a thing for a writer, at least in my case. After I wrote Grimoire Bound, I was definitely able to come back to Sigil Online, and while there were certain things I kind of lost along the way, mentally, of directions I wanted to take, there was a reinvigoration of the desire to write that story. If you eat Chinese every day for 2 weeks, well, do you really want Chinese for a third week? I mean, well, Chinese is pretty good, so maybe not. Maybe a bad reference.
Not the best example. There's so many good things there.
Yeah. So I mean, you gotta have that. I'm a sampler platter kind of guy. Like I like, if I go to, let's say, Red Lobster or any of those places, I don't want to just have crab. I don't want to just have a lobster or whatever. I want a little bit of everything. So I like to, and it's kind of like how I play video games too. I don't, unless it's Monster Hunter when it comes out, I like to jump around to different games and experience a lot of different things. So kind of in my writing, it's the same way. I don't like to stick to something exclusively. So writing Grimoire Bound was able to cleanse my palate, as you say, and I was able to come back for Hellions with new ideas, other little snippets I write down. I watch a movie, I play a game, listen to a certain song on YouTube or something, and it's like, oh, that's a good idea. Let's type that down, and then I take that little snippet, completely turn it into something else, and put it into the story. So
I'm very much along the same lines of like inspiration. Like I was on a martial arts movie binge at some point when I was writing Adventures of Terra Book 2, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's why there's a bunch of martial arts stuff, and there's a whole drunken kung fu fighting scene in Adventures of Terra Book 2 because I was watching one of my favorite movies, which is Drunken Master with Jackie Chan. I'm like, 1 and 2 are great. The third one not so much, but like it was totally informed by that desire and that passion of like, oh, I love this thing. I kind of forgot about that. Let's incorporate that into this other thing I love, which is writing and storytelling, because those are great stories and they translate well, especially if you're into those. I mean, for me personally, like a lot of my writing is pop culture referencing, like a ton of stuff, like every left and right sometimes. Like it's too much for some people. So like pulling from martial arts films or anime or like making jokes about, whatever, Kevin Smith movies. It all, plays in well for me and my storylines. But like I see what you're saying. My question for you now is like, are there certain things that you're inspired by that have made it into your stories?
So I would say, maybe to answer another question you might have, but while I answer this one, one of my favorite authors is Dan Abnett. He writes a lot of books in the Warhammer 40K universe. And when I found out about Warhammer 40K, I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. It's like StarCraft, but it's better. It's grittier. It's darker. It's amazing. I love it. And so like I was on a huge Warhammer 40K book binge. Like I was only reading 40K, and Dan Abnett is probably, I'd say, the best author anyone that writes that stuff. And so he wrote a book called Eisenhorn, which is basically about a kind of like an investigator who investigates demons and aliens and monsters. And I just love this story. And a lot of parts and pieces of that helped me develop the book I wrote, Demon Bane, which is not LitRPG. It's a sci-fi fantasy space opera.
Right.
But having read and kind of admired him for his writing prowess, it kind of, urged me to create my own story in my own way and in my own world. And I think that's kind of what stemmed the, I guess, initial Jeff becoming writer Jeff. And what was the original question?
What are you inspired by, basically? And we've already talked a little bit about the games that inspire you. Like, you're pulling in stuff from not Champions Online. I think it's a fictional world I was referring to, like City of Heroes, City of Villains.
I would say, as far as inspiration is concerned, if there's currently already something I want to write. So let's say I've finished off. Oh, let's use Sigil Online, for example. If I watch a movie or play a video game, I will, play through it all, and then I'll see something, unique. Whether it's a good example was I watched, I guess, a movie in theaters probably a year ago or something, and there was a preview, and the characters had like these black veins going on and stuff, like they were infected with something or something was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And just seeing that visually, I was like, okay, let me incorporate some sort of like infection that happened, or like, oh, they're so powerful that their, veins are going black because their anatomy is getting distorted. And so I'll see something, visually or hear it. And it'll give me this little idea that then I incorporate later. And I guess that's inspiration. I guess you could say. I'm not really sure, what else I would say that would be inspiring.
No, that's cool. I mean, like I said, we're all inspired by everything that we consume. Like, for me, it's always going to be like, I consume a bunch of media. I consume a bunch of video games. I read tons of LitRPG, and unbeknownst to me, someone's like, those ideas and those influences just filter into my writing. Because you don't write from nowhere. You don't write from a lack of experience. And so your experiences with video games, movies, pop culture, fiction, whatever it is, they're always going to inform what you're drawing from as a writer. And so it absolutely makes sense that you watch a movie, oh, this sparks an idea. And we're not talking about plagiarism in any way, shape, or form.
No.
It's always like, oh, that's a cool idea. How can I make that my own? Exactly. How can I use that in my story? Because it's a cool kernel of a concept, but maybe take an entirely different direction. Because that's part of the fun of writing, is, especially fiction, is that you're not limited by the constraints of a film studio or CGI or animation or whatever it is. Like in writing fiction, you can create whatever landscape you want. You can put yourself in the far, 30-30 fictional world universe, and there's nothing to stop you from doing so. There's no limitations on letters on a page. Basically. And so there's tons of influences. And I was just curious to see if there's anything in particular that inspired you. And we kind of already hit on a bunch of these as far as the video games that are inspiring.
In general, I derive inspiration from just, I guess, everything I consume. Is pretty much the easiest way to answer that. So,
perfect. Do you still have time to read, or is it just video games and writing?
I feel I've tried reading different, like starting different things out there, but as we were talking about earlier, I am very slow at reading. I have always been a slow reader for some reason. I don't know why. I don't know if I just like taking my time with it, but I'm a slow reader. So to get through just the sheer amount of, stuff out there, I was really into 40K for a while. And then I found the wiki for 40K and all the questions I wanted answered. Well, it was just like a couple taps away, and I could answer all the questions I was reading the books to discover, which kind of, I guess, destroyed it for me. But I definitely don't read as much as some people, and I should definitely be reading more. It's just, part of it for me is I often can't decide what I want to spend my time doing. Like, do I start this series or these other 100 series? And it's more indecisiveness than anything. Well,
that is definitely an honest answer, I have to say. So thank you for that. Me personally, I don't read anything but LitRPG these days. Like that's all I do. I mean, I do a podcast and a review thing for it, so that makes sense. But at the same time, I love reading LitRPG, so I don't think I could ever see myself stopping. Like that's what got me into the genre in the first place, was just an absolute adoration for RPG mechanics in fiction, whether it's sci-fi or fantasy. And I started the podcast before I was a writer. I started the reviews before I was a writer, and so I personally don't see myself ever stopping. But I don't know that I could ever. Yeah, I'm an addict. Sorry guys, I'm an LitRPG addict. I need my fix on a weekly basis.
I think one of the, I don't know if it's really a problem with me or what I guess I would call it, but I guess when I read other things that are in the same genre as me, I don't really want to step on any toes. Like if I read something, well, I might want to incorporate some of those ideas. I mean, that's just natural for any writer. And so I really don't want to feel like I'm, but I mean, I do that anyway with video games, etc. But I think one of the hard parts for me is if I'm writing a certain genre and I read something, if I have any issues with that something, I want to like change it. I'm like, that's not how I would do it. Or, I wish this would work differently. And that happened a lot with, to be a little bit more revealing about my backstory as being a writer, I used to write short story erotica.
Did you want to give out that name in particular, or just like pretend it didn't exist?
Everyone who knows me knows I wrote it.
Okay.
I mean, they don't know what it was. Like, no, I don't give out names or anything, but it's really no secret that I used to write erotica. That's how I kind of learned Amazon publishing and everything like that. So I think it tempered me to be able to do what I'm doing now, as far as the whole publishing and marketing and all that fun stuff. But when I was doing that, every time I would read someone else's story, as far as like research, like, oh, how are they writing what I'm writing? And I'd read it and be like, this isn't what I would do. I wouldn't do it that way. And so like I would be too analytical about it. Like I couldn't be a reader. I was a writer. And
it became like shop talk for you, because you're like, oh, exactly. I know how I would do it. And
I wasn't able to enjoy it because I was too, I was dissecting it too much. And even after I started writing, to publish certain other, like I remember reading Hunger Games, those 3 books. And after I started actually writing and I would read, the series, I couldn't help but dissect it every step of the way. And so for somehow, even though I loved, Warhammer 40K, I don't know if I can get out of the writer mindset when I start reading something. So I don't know what's wrong with me, but
no, nothing wrong with you. I think that's an absolutely normal response to your expanding knowledge of writing in general. Because I find myself doing the same thing. I think for me, I have an outlet for that particular response, in that I actually review these novels, and so part of that function is me, actually kind of taking them apart and saying, oh, this works. Maybe try this later next time. And like, oh, maybe you could have done this thing, but you didn't. And it affected my enjoyment. So that's part of my experience as a reviewer as well as a reader. So maybe that's why I'm not burnt out, I guess, or able to still do it. But I think it's also a natural part of like, oh, you're becoming more of an informed person in the background stuff of your genre. I take an example of like movie makers still watch movies. I mean, I listen to a lot of podcasts still. One of my favorite podcasters is Kevin Smith, who's a filmmaker, Dogma, Chasing Amy, a bunch of stuff. But he's also a podcaster, and he also watches movies, he's also a film lover. And so, but when he talks about other films, he's also at the same point not just appreciating them as a moviegoer, but also as a director and as a writer. And so sometimes he breaks down and like, oh, this is the third act, 3-act structure, and these are some behind the scene things. This particular scene was done this way because of this particular, structural reason, or like, I'll tell you, it's because they ran out of money and they had to edit or whatever. But his impression of it is informed because of his own experience as a director. That does not, however, take away from his enjoyment of the film. Just because you know more of the background or how behind the scenes stuff works doesn't necessarily mean you can't enjoy it. It just means that you have another level of appreciation that most readers might not necessarily have. You know what I mean? Like when I read Way the Shaman or Of the Land or whatever, even though I'm I guess technically a writer, and I've done more research into like the story mechanics of writing, which I appreciate because I'm a total noob at the whole thing. Now when I read, I'm like, oh, okay, this is that structure. I'm like, oh yeah, that plot twist should be coming about 5%. It's about 30% mark or something. Like, and then, like there it is, or like then it's like 20%. I'm like, hey, where's that plot twist? Where
Yeah,
at that same point, and that sometimes informs like my view of the story. It doesn't stop me from saying, oh, this was still fun, or this was not fun. It's just that when I say this is not fun, I actually have reasons to say, oh, this is why it's not fun, or this is fun because they did something really cool at like the 45% mark, or at their first plot twist at the 33% mark, or whatever it is going to be. And they took that structure, but they took it in a new way, and they went off the path or whatever. And so I just have more vocabulary, and I have more real, I guess, terms or tools to describe why I enjoyed a thing or I didn't. And you know, that's just my point of view. But just because you know more doesn't mean you can't enjoy it. It's a different viewpoint.
Yeah.
Oh, but I was gonna ask you real quick. Can I guess what kind of erotic fiction you wrote? Would that be okay?
You can guess.
Okay, I can guess. Okay. I'm gonna guess it's not RPG stuff because this was before that happened. Because I would want to say like video game pixel fiction, but let me see. How long ago was this?
It was before I published. I'd say somewhere. I stopped for about a year.
So like 5 or 6 years ago. What?
No. This would have been like 2014 to 2016.
Okay, so okay. I'm trying to think of the trends in the romance genre at that point. So, because I know now.
See, I found a niche.
Did you?
I found a niche that I kind of stuck with.
Oh, okay, well, something like a billionaire romance, werebear fiction. No. I'm like,
I have written.
Oh,
I did not write any werebears.
No shifter erotica. Okay. Man, those are my choices. I was gonna go like shifter erotica or like
there was some
pregnant baby billionaires or something, or like
no, none of that. There was some shifters.
I was thinking like that's about the time that what was it? Dominatrix BDM stuff was popping up because
I couldn't get into like
50 Shades.
I didn't know it.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to appreciate it, so I didn't go anywhere near BDSM at all.
Okay. Then I can't guess. Okay, so never mind. I was just throwing some ideas. I was hoping that like we could relate, because I honestly, when I started out with recommendation reviews, I saw like romance is a really big section. There's a ton of like stuff there. I'm like, okay, that might be something I could always try out because I'm good with words, I guess. But there was definitely a period where I was like, maybe I could write erotic fiction. I'm like, I can describe things, and that's all that basically is. It's like describing actions of a certain category, with maybe some romance and some relationship stuff. Because the romance fiction I've read is not super plot heavy. Like the emphasis is on relationships and sex, and that those things together, and like with some like loose plot pointing to make it interesting a little bit. But there's nothing like epic fantasy. There's not like super space science fiction necessarily. So for most erotic films that I've perused, so I'm like, oh, maybe I can do this, and it's just like, okay, didn't work out. But I know some LitRPG authors who do mesh them very much together. No pun intended, guys. So yeah, I
had tried. So one of the things that appealed to me about it was I could write a story in a day, essentially, 5, 6, 7, 8,000 words, whatever would technically makes a short story. And, I was able to, pump one out a day or whatever it ended up being at the time I was working on it.
Interesting phrasing, just saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And people definitely want just, an interesting premise for, that scene. Some people do like, the longer form whole novels of stuff and, interpersonal relationships and all this other stuff. But mine was always a little bit more, concentrated on, a situation or a scene happening, very condensed. But there were a couple that I expanded out to like 3 or 5 in a series, and those were always more interesting for me to write because I was building a more expanded world instead of just, let's just have this little thing, all these cool ideas that just kind of get thrown away in one 5,000 word story. So like I felt like all my creative acumen, or whatever you want to call it, was just getting wasted.
I don't know if I could write something just 5,000 words. That's like a chapter for me.
It's
like
a chapter
in a novel. Like that's I'm such a wordy writer, man. Like I can't help it. Like my scene, like my chapters are at least minimum 3,000 words generally. So I'm like, that's why my whole novels end up being like 130, 140,000 words. I'm like, because I don't know how to edit apparently.
Yeah, I kind of aim for roughly 100,000 words. I know Paragon's was over 100. Hellions is somewhere between 90 and 100. It was a little shorter. When I start plotting something out, and I get a piece of paper and I'm like, here's where we start, here's where we end, and I start adding little things from start to finish. And then when I look at it, I'm like, okay, that 2,000 words, this 5,000 words, that's just 1,000 words stuck in there. And by the time I finish, adding up all these things, it's like, 70,000 words. And I'm like, okay, that's a good, that's enough plotted out to start. And then that turns into, somewhere between 90 and 105,000 words, because I know I'll be adding in extra content or think of an extra plot point. And so 5,000 words really isn't a whole lot, but when you get into the mindset of, I need to write something shorter,
right?
It's a little easier. And then I started doing, novels, and I'm not sure how easily I'd be able to go back to, write a whole, erotic scene in 5,000 words. I'm like, can I have 15,000 words?
You're actually right. There's a different mindset and structure content to having to have your story encapsulated in 5,000 words. Like there's an efficiency that needs to be there to complete that story that I'm not being fine with saying I don't have that skill set. I don't know that can be that efficient to do, because I'll write like paragraphs and paragraphs of detail, like, this is what this scene looks like, this is what that wall looks like, this is what the person's wearing, and then there's a bunch of dialogue, and like I'm super descriptive, maybe overly so for some people, and I think that's that efficiency, that if you can put a story like concretely, like you can have a target and you just hit it, whether it's 5,000 words or 10,000, whatever it is. I don't think I can do it. I mean, like I tried writing a short fiction, and I had planned for it to be like a 20,000 word short story that's a prequel for like one of the characters in my Adventures in Terror series for the Cobalt. And it's like 50,000 words already. And I'm like, that didn't work out.
Yeah, I think one of the bonuses I had kind of going for me was I kind of started with that short story stuff, and then when I started writing LitRPG, I started that Permadeath Legacy, and that was more novella size. So each book was 30,000 words, I think, on average. So I was going from 5,000 to 8,000 for a condensed story to these 30,000, like 1/3 novels, essentially. And then Paragons, which was 100K. So I was able to, I guess, kind of work myself up to it, but I don't really feel like I had a whole lot of trouble doing that. But yeah, it's definitely a different mindset of, all right, let's, you're condensing all this to have, an erotic scene of some sort, and you've got to build up a premise, the reward, I guess you could say. And, it's got to finish somehow. So.
Right. Oh, I just noticed you have a tattoo in your arm. Is that?
Yeah,
it looks like it's almost a whole half sleeve. Is it?
It's just that much there.
I can't see what it is directly with this.
Sorry, it's like steampunk stuff.
Oh, that is kind of neat. I see a bunch of gears. I see some stuff there. Is that the only one you have, or is that the only one you can show us?
Yeah, that's the only one I got. I had I really wanted to get one back at my last job when I was just saving money, and I was like, I could get a tattoo finally, and so I just really wanted something steampunk. So I had them draw up a steampunk.
Yeah, when you said like, I had one on my back, I was like, does he have a tramp stamp? I'm like, no.
Nope, just this, no tramp stamp.
Well, hey, tattoos are informed by societal stuff as well. I know there was always that trend for a little while in the 90s for like the barbed wire around someone's bicep and stamps on their back, and I'm like, okay, that's out of fad, I guess, at this point. But I've always thought about getting a tattoo as well. I'm just such a punk because I don't think I can stand the pain. Also, before I was also in like industry where I had to be professional and like tattoos were frowned upon. But like now that I'm an independent businessman, which is weird to think about, you know, coming from my
do whatever you want.
Yeah, I'm like I can just get a whole body tattoo, like
face, head, just everything.
Yeah, and that would be a choice. I don't know that my family and my wife would appreciate it, but that would definitely be a choice.
Yeah.
But whenever I think about getting a tattoo, it's like, oh, maybe something LitRPG related. Maybe not like LitRPG directly, but like
every book you've ever read, just a little tiny thing, you know, either the name of the title or like the actual, get like a tiny snapshot of the cover.
Oh, that would.
Just like everyone on your arm or back.
I'd have to go with the back because that's a lot of books. Like
that's a lot of books.
Like these last year or so, it's probably a good 2,000 to 3,000, probably more. So like that's a whole, like I would be like a librarian tattoo on my back with just like shelves of books and like titles and like things that are like, that would definitely be, that is honestly a really cool idea. Man, now I have to go get tattooed. There you go, folks. Hey, folks, as a new Patreon reward for Ramon Mejia or the LitRPG Podcast, if we get up to like, I don't know, $3,000 a month maybe in Patreon support, I will totally go get a back tattoo of every LitRPG book that I've ever read, and it'll just be huge, and it'll be there as a reward for the community. So there you go, folks. We have a new Patreon support reward. Thank you to Jeff Sproul.
But then you're going to have to go around shirtless all the time to show it off.
I will have to work out, I guess. But yeah, because
wait, is that the 3,500 or 4,000 a month, reward? I'll get the tattoo at 3, but I won't work out till 4.
That would definitely be some motivation, like an extra $5,000 or $1,000. Everyone puts it like, no, you need to take care of yourself, Ramon. You need to go to the gym, eat healthy. Here's some money. Go take care of it. We want to keep you around for a while. That's like the weirdest form of motivational thing to do, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving back into a little bit into, I guess, some actual LitRPG author questions. The technical side of it. Now, you said you've been self-publishing since you did your erotic fiction stuff. So it's been 4 or 5 years already. How do you think of self-publishing versus traditional? Have you ever been approached by any traditional publishers? Have you tried to do traditional publishing at all? Or has it always been like self-publishing for you?
For me, there has never been any interest in traditional publishing. The sheer amount of work and Hunger Games of the whole thing is just completely the time you could take to write, all the stuff you would need to try and have someone find you or, get approved. Just the sheer amount of time in that, you could write a whole nother book. And I know people who've gone that route and they don't really do much better than if they could have just built it up themselves. And I'm sure traditional works for a lot of people. For me, it's never been on the table.
Yeah.
It's never been something I've researched it out of curiosity, but it's always been self-publishing for me. I didn't try to send my manuscript to anyone or get out there in any way. When I published Paragons, the Podium, I think, approached me on Facebook, and I don't really like talking poorly about anything or anyone.
Okay.
I'm one of those people who just, it's not that I want everyone to like me. I just don't want anyone to hate me. So, but yeah, so Podium, I mean, they serve, I guess, a purpose of some sort. And some people see a lot of value in what Podium does. For me, I didn't really like the idea of giving away the rights to any of my stuff, even in audio form. And when I found out that essentially going with Podium increases the price of your audiobooks, I was like, I really don't want that to happen. And for some people, they want that extra money. For me, I didn't really see any need to do that. And Jeff Hayes was already going to be my narrator anyway, so he would have either been my narrator just for me, or I would have requested him through, Podium.
Right.
And I don't know if he would have made anything different going through Podium in that setup, but I felt like for, the fans of Paragons, it was going to be cheaper for them not to go with Podium, and because Podium tacks on another, $5, $10, whatever dollars that they do, because that's how they make their
right. That's essentially their cut, like additional cut in addition, because for the audience at home, we'll do a little bit of explaining. We talked about a little bit traditional and self-publishing. Now, this also applies to audiobooks as well. There's a system in place from Audible called ACX that lets you essentially put out your book for review to a bunch of narrators, and you can pick them. You can self-publish your own audiobook. Then there's also a traditional side, people like Podium and Tantor, who basically take your story, they'll do all the work for the audiobook. They'll pick a narrator, they'll do the editing, they'll do the marketing stuff, and you as the writer basically just are signing over the rights to it. And you're going to make less money if somebody else does it for you because they're putting a lot of work, and of course they want to make their cut of the money as well. If you're a self-publisher, though, you keep more royalties, but there's also more work on your side. And so this also applies towards like your regular ebook stuff. And so what Jeff here is talking about, essentially, he went with self-publishing for his ebook, but like traditional publishing for his audiobook. And so those are very interesting experiences, at least from my point of view, because
it's still self-publishing for audio, because I didn't go with Podium.
Oh, you didn't end up doing it after all? Oh, okay.
No, I did not go. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if I directly pointed that out. So I self-published my ebooks, and I self-published with Jeff Hayes as the narrator, the audio. So I did not go with Podium. I told them, no, thank you. Because I didn't want my readers to pay that, increased amount that Podium charges on books, which is roughly about $10 tacked on.
Well, I don't know that every reader is going to pay the extra, because don't they use also credits?
Correct.
If they're using the Audible.
And that's a factor as well, is a lot of readers, especially that I've seen on like the LitRPG groups, is they'll use their credits. And so the price of the audiobook really doesn't come into play because they're using their credits. And similarly for self-publishing, especially, precisely on Amazon, is you make the book, $3, $5, whatever, and then it's in Kindle Unlimited. Well, a lot of people, there's a ton of value for the reader in Kindle Unlimited, and so they don't care about the price. They're just borrowing it anyway. So,
but at the same point, like, as far as like an author goes, do you find that your Kindle Unlimited stuff is worth it to you? Or do you think have you ever experimented just doing a book not in Kindle Unlimited and comparing it to something you put in Kindle Unlimited and seeing what benefits you more?
So to kind of get into the marketing aspect a little bit.
Sorry.
So I was publishing erotica back when there was no Kindle Unlimited. So I got to experience what Amazon was like. No Kindle Unlimited. You're just selling, erotica for $2.99, 99 cents, whatever it was that we were pricing it at. And Kindle Unlimited came along. Well, Kindle Unlimited 1.0 is kind of what it was called at the time. And it was like a flat rate per story. So it was like $1.30 or something, I believe. So
no matter how big the
story was, it was a flat rate. So I write 5,000 words, gets borrowed, I get $1.30. Someone writes a novel at 100K, $1.30 per borrow. So those of us in the short stories were making a bit of money doing what we were doing. And, we didn't really change anything ourselves. We were writing the same things we were writing, but we were making more than the people who had, full-length novels. And then they came out with Kindle 2.0, Kindle Unlimited 2.0, which makes it per word, per page?
Per page read, I think, or something?
Per page, yeah.
However they divide the pages.
Yeah, so they created an algorithm for per page, and actually erotica got like slammed pretty hard, the short story stuff, that is, because we were making quite a bit less on the new system. So things kind of changed, and at that point, actually, I got out of it. I stopped writing altogether. I tried going to Twitch and streaming and just trying to find other avenues, because I was like, man, this isn't going to work out anymore. Well, I come back to it like about a year later and figure out ways to make it work. the erotica stuff, that is. And so when I came back, that's when I actually tested, all right, let's just put up the erotica not in Kindle Unlimited, see how that does. And I was making, a certain amount every month. And then I tried putting it in Kindle Unlimited, and it was always better for Kindle Unlimited.
Yeah.
Kindle Unlimited is, if you are in our situation where you're not, making, I mean, I don't know how much you're making. I'm not making $100,000 a year at this point. But how about this way? If you're not making like 50 to 100 grand every book, I'm not making 50 to 100 grand every book. The Kindle Unlimited is the way to go, because book rank is king on Amazon, and every borrow is the same as a buy.
Right.
And you're still getting paid for Kindle Unlimited, and those people who are, borrowing it are pushing the book rank up, and that's more important than you making an extra 50 cents on a purchase.
Right. And that's kind of what it comes down to.
It's so incredibly more powerful.
Especially when it's like especially when you have like larger books like ours, where they're 300-400 pages, like those Kindle Unlimited reads kind of work out to about the same as it does for like a regular purchase price of like $2.99 or $3.99, whatever you're pricing for your book.
Right.
And personally, my Kindle Unlimited income is sometimes like the same as the purchase, or 2 times better, depending on how far along in the cycle it is. Like at the beginning, your first publish a book, your direct purchases are probably going to outweigh your Kindle Unlimited a little bit. Absolutely. But then as it goes on, like your Kindle Unlimited reads, at least for me, are relatively steady. Yeah. As opposed to those direct buys, which kind of peter out a little bit. And then some, like for me at least, like Kindle Unlimited has always been like a huge win, at least. And I even if it wasn't like as big a win for me, I always planned to do it just because I never thought I was going to be doing this full time. And I wanted the readers to at least have the opportunity to read my story for free. And from my reader's point of view, I always knew like, oh, I love Kindle because I'm more than happy to take a chance on some other author I don't know, or some story I've never read, or just some novel description, or I'm saying, oh, that's interesting, I'll try this out. There's a much more likely chance of me saying, oh, if it's in Kindle Limited, I'll try it out, as opposed to paying even like 99 cents. Is for some reason there's this mental gap, like, oh, I have to pay extra to take a risk, as opposed to on Kindle Limited. It's like, I'm taking a risk for free. I've already paid my $10 for the month, so whatever I read is whatever I read. So I have no problem like starting a book if it's boring. Oh, I'll drop it. It's not a big deal. I haven't lost anything. So I think that really plays well into our particular genre of like, oh, RPG fiction or LitRPG stuff, because it is new and people are always going to be taking risks the first time they try it out. And then when they fall in love with it, like we assume most of us have, because I know me, and like the first time I read something was like video game related with their RPG mechanics, like, this is it. This is the thing I've been missing my entire life. I didn't know it. And then I dove head on to it of like, 3,000 books later or whatever. Mm-hmm. And, I never would have gotten there if I hadn't tried out that first, KU read. So I'm like,
right. Yeah. I mean, I was definitely really kind of not happy with Kindle Unlimited when I was writing erotica and short story stuff. But I mean, if you're writing novels, Kindle Unlimited is just the best for readers. I think it's the best for authors. Now, obviously, if you somehow have a fan base that's only on Apple or something like that, it can be a little problematic. But it's a matter of where you built your fan base, I guess.
I looked up because somebody brought up recently, like, oh, some nefarious person was republishing LitRPG stories on Apple on like iBooks under their own name and taking royalties from people, like plagiarism, like direct ripping people off. And so I checked it out just to make sure my stuff wasn't there. I'm like, oh, my ebooks aren't important enough or interesting enough to do it, I guess. But it seemed like I looked at the offerings under LitRPG for Apple, and I was like, there's like 30 books. There's not a lot there. Yeah. Like there are more audiobooks because Audible puts stuff on iTunes. Right. The same way that they do for their own services on Amazon. So like my audiobooks show up there on iTunes and everything. But like the ebook stuff is like, no, nobody's really publishing, I guess, within our genre. I can't say nobody. I said there's a much smaller selection on iTunes. Like most of it is on Amazon because of Kindle Unlimited, because that is such an amazing program for readers in general. Like Amazon basically owns the ebook market at this point because
Right.
of the Kindle Unlimited program, because people just $10, whatever you can read. So like for voracious readers who read, there's some people in our groups who read like a novel an hour sometimes. Like legitimately, they'll read 100 pages an hour. I'm like, that is absolutely ball dropping amazing. I'm like, that's great. But like Kindle Unlimited is definitely the thing that they love.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it saves them money. Because I've kind of done it in that I try to support authors by purchasing as well at this point. And I'm like, it's expensive. Like I'm spending easily several $100s a month on ebooks. I review them, so it's part of like the cost of like doing business, which is fine. But I can only imagine other people like $10 versus several hundred. And I'm like, the $10 is a lot easier. And as far as like authors go, authors are getting paid relatively amount the same, but they're getting tons more exposure because more readers are willing to take the chance on their unknown story potentially, or it's like something different. And then if you have to fall in love, then hey, they consume everything, you know?
Yeah, it kind of hurts me on the inside when I see someone on like Royal Road, for instance. Great website, lots of writers kind of testing the waters with new stories and things, and they can kind of see what works for them and what readers are going to latch on to. But I see a lot of authors who start on Royal Road and they decide to go wide, is the term of putting your book everywhere instead of, Amazon, just Amazon, that is. So I guess for people listening, the term going wide is, I want to make sure my book is available anywhere that I can put it. And then usually the only difference to that is just on Amazon in the Kindle Select program, which allows it then to be in Kindle Unlimited, which can be borrowed for free if people have this subscription. And a lot of people on Royal Road, or an amount, will keep it published on Royal Road because you can't have it listed on Royal Road and published on Amazon at the same time.
Well, Kindle Unlimited specifically, we should say, like Kindle Unlimited requires exclusivity to that particular program for at least, I think, a 3-month term.
90 days, yes.
Yeah.
So if someone has been posting their work on Royal Road, for instance, and their whole book is there, well, if they want to go to Amazon and put it in Kindle Unlimited, they've got to take all but 10% of it down. So a lot of people, I keep saying a lot, I really don't know the amount, but people will decide to leave it on a Royal Road and publish everywhere they can. And so their book can't be borrowed for free on like Amazon. And I'll see that their book does really well. Like it's one of these stories.
100 reviews later, that kind of thing.
Yeah, 100, 200 reviews later. Like they obviously got a lot of attention, but just out of my own pure curiosity, because I love success stories. I love seeing people do well. And like you, for instance, it's like because our books came out, your first published book came right after or right before, the day before Paragons, and I was watching yours, and just as excited to see how yours was doing as mine was doing. And so I'll see these people take their work and put it on Amazon and not Kindle Unlimited, and it'll do really well, like top 200 or top 100, and then it's not in Kindle Unlimited, which means it could have gone higher. It could have gone to 50 or whatever, double whatever they were doing, because generally your borrows are about equal to your sales, number for number. So just seeing that happen, I'm just like, you could have done so much better.
And there's also the royalty difference between doing well on Amazon exclusively and a wide release, because this is behind the scenes stuff for the people at home. But like, if you do Kindle Limited and exclusive, you get like 70% royalties on your sticker prices, and as opposed to like a wide release, which I think something like it's less, I believe, isn't it? Or is that related to price?
Okay, so for Amazon ebooks, the only price royalty difference is if it's under
$2.99.
If it's under $2.99, it's 30% royalty, and if it's above $2.99, it's 70% royalty. Now the difference is if you go ACX for those audiobooks.
Oh yeah, that's the one.
And you do not do, if you're exclusive to ACX and who they distribute to, it's
40%, I think.
40%.
Yeah.
If you're exclusive, it's above 40. It's 70.
Is
60. I think so.
I thought it was like 40%
if you
for
go wide.
40% if you're exclusive, which kind of sucks. But I mean, like money
No, I
wise,
thought
it's
it was
fine.
like
But like
50 or
then
70.
if you're not exclusive, it's like 20% or like 15%. I want to say.
No. It's definitely 40% if you are not exclusive, and then like 60% if you are exclusive.
Either way,
mostly
exclusivity
sure.
generally gets you more money. I think that's the point. Even if our numbers are entirely
exactly.
incorrect, that's
they're
kind of the
probably
point.
wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm a huge proponent of all in on Amazon.
Yeah, me too. Just because again, they kind of own the market at this point. Unless like some other newcomer just comes and accepts them, I don't see that changing anytime in the future. And that gives them leverage, for better or worse, to do what they want to, and which includes the Kindle Unlimited program when it came out was like really revolutionary. I mean, the subscription model wasn't new, but specifically for books, it was, because it made it almost feel like
books,
a library, digital one. And that was kind of the key to them blowing up in that way. Because once they did KU, they really did, shift from selling as many physical copies to doing whole hog into like digital. And then that it's been like a really big marketplace for especially independent authors like us. Like before Kindle Unlimited, I don't know that it would have been as beneficial to do like freelance novels like of a certain size. Like you said, you were more likely to make money on like smaller things. I'm like, that's a cool case, I guess. So me, big fan of KU. Not everybody is. Like other people hate the exclusivity aspect of it. Like if you're exclusive on KU, you can't. You're probably not going to be New York Times bestselling author. You're not going to be an LA Times bestselling author because you can't publish in other locations, and those titles require a wide release for them to even consider you at any point whatsoever. So I'm like, there are benefits and there are trade-offs.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're someone who wants those titles for, at least the first book of your series or, any of those things, you've got to make certain concessions. Yeah. But if you're in a situation where you're able to get that title anyway, well, you're probably doing pretty good.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Like me, I just want the money. Like the money, I enjoyed the money more.
Yeah. The money's good. And, being able to do something that, is good for the readers. Like some readers are going to buy it at full price. They're going to be great at supporting you. I mean, and some readers have to do, Kindle Unlimited, and that's perfectly fine too. Hell, even, a reader who can't, purchase and they, link or share or, like a post or whatever, every little bit helps.
Yeah, no, that's kind of my philosophy with the audiobooks, because I don't know if you know it, but your book is pirated out there as an audiobook, as is mine, as all our stuff. Any audiobook that ever gets made, it gets pirated. Particular websites, which I may or may not have visited in the past when I was poor. But that was part of the thing. Like as soon as I saw it, I was like, part of me was like, yay! People cared enough to pirate my books, my audiobook at least. And I basically recognize that that's going to happen. And so if you have to pirate it because you can't afford $30 for an audiobook, I'm okay with that. Like really, I am. Like come support the podcasters, come support the audiobook, some other share your love with that book, share your love with that audiobook. Like there's so many other ways to support. Like I say it every week. I'm like, tons of ways to support the podcast. You can share, just talk about it, and those are all free. Or just click on a link, and it doesn't cost anything when you purchase a book. And those things, same thing apply to novels and like ebook. Your author's like, go write a review. Just go share a link about the post saying, "Oh, I love this book a lot," and it's surprisingly very helpful in establishing an audience, especially for somebody who's just doing this for the first time. And I run into that a lot, and that's part of the reason I do the podcast in the first place. Is that authors who are writing for the first time need exposure, and so if nobody's knows it exists, whether it's good or bad or whatever, nobody's gonna read it because you get lost in the shuffle of things that come out on a weekly basis these days. So I'm like,
yeah. When I was first jumping into erotica, actually, I read this Ask Me Anything on Reddit of someone who also wrote erotica, and one of the things they mentioned was when you're publishing on Amazon, do not turn on DRM because it doesn't matter. All it's doing is hurting your readers that are actually paying for it.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, that makes sense. And then, after I got writing a little bit more, and I would see so a popular writer forum is Kboards.
Yeah, I've heard of them. I don't think I've ever visited.
Kboard's Writers Cafe, I think, is the forum and then subforum. And I've been there just to kind of, see what everyone else is up to. And I haven't really been a huge poster there, but like, I don't know. I've seen a lot of people just, get really grumpy about, oh no, I found my book, being here and pirated. And while they do have a point to be made that Amazon, if you're exclusive to Amazon and your book is freely available somewhere, Amazon could technically take your book down,
right?
Because you're kind of violating the policy, but it's not your fault. And I haven't really seen that as being a huge issue either. Because
not personally, I haven't read about it being too big of a deal, mostly because Amazon recognizes that you don't have control of that. As long as you can prove that it's not you doing it.
Yeah. Now, if you create a whole nother account and put your book under, if you're really super shady about it, they're gonna come after you.
Right, but that doesn't really make sense for authors trying to make money. Yeah.
So like the whole piracy issue, there's people out there who can't afford it, and I understand that. When I was younger and didn't have a job, I did what I had to do to enjoy the stuff I wanted to see.
Yeah.
But nowadays, for instance, when I want to watch a movie, I don't go torrent it. I go to Google Play and I buy it for $5 or $15 or whatever. Right. Even if I've already seen it,
there's a balance between convenience and expense. And more as these things become ubiquitous, you can just click on a button on your phone or on your TV or on your computer, and it's there instantaneously as opposed to waiting 4, 5, 8 hours to download a movie or a video game, hypothetically. Then people are going to go for the $2 option, and it's just that balance. The black market has always existed for everything. It's a fundamental part of the market system.
It's not going anywhere. Yeah. I think it serves a good purpose.
Yeah, and it does. And as far as things it's always going to exist, so you have to accept that it does. And trying to fight it it's a waste of time. It's a losing battle. Yeah. Instead, adapt to it. Make your things less expensive. Make your things more available. Make them more convenient to download. And that's how you combat piracy, because those factors in a larger scheme outweigh the free. Time consuming free, basically.
Well, piracy is never going to essentially, if you're an author who sells 100 books per release or whatever, and piracy is not the problem for why you only sold 100 books. Mm-hmm. Piracy is never the issue. Right. It's like a tack on.
The people who pirate were probably not going to buy your book in the first place.
Exactly. But piracy is never going to kill you as an author. It's not the reason of your downfall or why you didn't sell any books. It might be, easy to say, my book was downloaded 1,000 times on this website. That's
$1,000 or whatever.
That's $1,000 or 2,000 or whatever you want to, call it. Well,
there's a presumption of purchase there. That doesn't really exist.
There is no purchase there. There was never a purchase there. So,
if anything, people who pirate your book initially are more likely to buy future books because they like your series when they come into money. And that's what they come down to a lot of times, that people can't afford to take a risk. Which brings us back to Kay in that with Kindle Unlimited, people can afford to take a risk on something new and try it out. And that's okay. Which is why I think Amazon is doing better ebook wise than other platforms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like to imagine, especially for people who, don't have jobs or whatever, maybe they're just young and they haven't gone out and gotten a job. You got, people in that age group. And it's maybe they don't have a credit card. They can't sign up for Kindle Unlimited. So, they go to where they can, get stuff for free. And, that's okay because, years go by, they get a job, they're still reading a certain author and, they start buying. Yeah. So it all works out.
No, I absolutely agree. Yeah. I'm generally okay with I'm okay with, this is a personal point of view. Piracy, of my things, I'm okay with. I understand people don't make money. Plagiarism, though, not so okay with.
Yeah, plagiarism is a whole different thing.
And I've seen it with a couple people's books in that an author will literally just rewrite a whole story, try to publish as their own. I'm like, that's different. That's you stealing from people.
That's stealing. That's straight up stealing. And
So there you go. Okay. A couple other technical questions and questions from the audience. Do you do marketing at all for your books? do you do anything to like get reviews for you? Because this is something I've seen just in general. Like the more reviews somebody gets, especially very quickly when they publish, the better the Amazon algorithms doing like promoting them and like getting their book in front of other people. So it's a thing that actually matters apparently. Do you do anything to kind of get that ball rolling?
So I learned a lot when I was writing erotica. I mean, when I say I tempered myself in erotica, it was essentially, learning the things that other people found out about how Amazon works and kind of incorporating that into my own, knowledge base and trying to work out for myself. Reviews play a big part of that and I mean, I don't know, what the magic numbers are essentially, but I do line up people, and there's people tend to change from book to book. But I do offer my book out to, a group of people. Usually it's by mailing list. One of the easy, tools for authors is you have a mailing list and you can, promote yourself to your mailing list, but you can also, have a smaller subset of people from that mailing list, and you give them the book a week early and say, hey, here's this book. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a review. Now, obviously, Amazon has stipulations that you cannot, entice them to leave a review. You can't pay these people. You can't, be like, you're only getting this book because I want a review. It's hey, I have some people. Here's the book. If you want to leave a review, cool, whatever. You're going to get the book regardless, whether you leave a review or not. So I do think it's important, perception-wise, to have reviews when you launch a book, because most people, like myself, take a whole week to read a book. And so if you publish a book on, Monday, I mean, I wouldn't even probably finish it until 7 days later. And then, that's probably when I'll leave a review. So that's like 7 days. I mean, most people read a little faster than me, but, that's 3 to 7 days that you've got a book sitting there with nobody reviewing it. So you as a reader, you look at it and you're like, hey, this new book just came out. And for me, especially, I do this a lot with Steam games. Unknown developer, new game comes out, and it's just like, well, there's no reviews on it. Do I want to take the risk and play this or read this or watch this first? So it's really an expectation thing, and I think having some reviews, legitimate reviews of people who've read the book,
whether they're good or bad, I don't think that matters as much.
Because you're going to get those reviews when the book comes out. I mean, I know a lot of authors out there have really tried to game Amazon, and I'm sure there's places to buy reviews and all that stuff that's shady as heck. I would never touch it or go near it, and haven't. And because Amazon will catch you, Amazon always figures it out. And I've seen a lot of sob stories on Amazon or K-boards and otherwise of Amazon catching people. But yeah, like legitimate reviews that you give people, the book early so that they can review early, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, I think in technical terms, like an ARC, an advanced reader copy. Yeah. We send them out. As a reviewer personally, I get them a lot. Well, not a lot. I get them on a fairly regular basis from people like, oh, I have a new book coming out, or would you like a copy of it to like read it and have a review ready like when it comes out?
Right.
And this day, I'm like, yeah, sure. And a lot of times they're bad reviews. For me, there's no, as long as I'm saying only give a review if you're going to give a good review, it's totally legitimate. A lot of my reviews just aren't good because the novels have issues for whatever reason, but sometimes they're really awesome. Like, oh, this is a great discovery. And but part of that also is like just being transparent. Like, oh, I got this as an early art copy. Just letting you know, here's the review. This book sucks, or this doesn't, and that's kind of the. But like, I absolutely agree in that. If you can get some reviews in, day 1, day 2, day 3, that starts you on a nice ball rolling because people then see, oh, other people have read this novel and they liked it, or they didn't because of these things, and that at least shows that people are at least interested in your book, and I think it actually does affect how Amazon ranks your novel and how Amazon will promote your novel. whether
Right.
it's going to show up in someone's feed or on their Kindle book or on their, their their Kindle reader book, app, whatever. Like you might be interested in these things as well, based upon like purchase prices and like Kindle pages read, and like also reviews, whether they're going to be positive or negative.
Yeah, the Amazon's always changing their algorithm, I'm sure, just to, mess with people and, stay a step ahead. But I'm sure that there's a certain amount of reviews that help trigger certain things. But
Yeah, but it's always like a correlation to me. Like people who do really well have their books with like 100, 200, 300 reviews. And so there's definitely a correlation between like, oh, people who are reading it and willing to leave a review and the kind of success of the novels as far as like actual purchases.
Well, reviews will beget readers, and readers will beget reviews. So it's like, mutual relationship between the two. But I don't think, it's, if you have, 3 or 12 reviews on your book, the day it comes live, as long as there's, some there, I think that's, helpful, because, more people will take that initial jump. If it's, no reviews or like A reviews, that kind of sets reader expectation in a certain way. I don't really think there's a huge difference between like 10 and 25 upon the first day, because readers are going to encounter it at different times. But yeah, reviews are definitely important, and they help set reader expectation that people have taken the risk and looked at it. And someone who's borrowed your book really hasn't taken any different of a risk than the person you provided the art copy to.
Right.
So, but I mean, and kind of we were just discussing, sometimes you get bad reviews from your ARC readers, and that's fine. 2-star, 3-star. You can't write a book that pleases everyone.
Never, ever.
Because I
don't read the reviews anymore because of that. I'm like, when you get your first like 1-star review and it's like, this is horrible. It's like, oh,
I can't help but read them a little bit.
Yeah,
I do read them a little bit, because just to kind of see what point, and sometimes that's a mistake, because you'll see a review and it resonates with you as a writer, and then you go into the next book keeping that review in mind, and maybe that was a bad idea, maybe that kind of changed your style, and you really probably shouldn't have done it. So there's definitely some give and take when it comes to reading and thinking about the reviews people leave.
Well, I think there's also a difference between an Amazon review and like an actual critique, I think, from absolutely. Someone you trust and someone who's like maybe is in the same business as like as a fellow what's the word, someone in the same work as you,
competitor,
a comrade,
competitor,
maybe a competitor. Like the same idea, like someone who knows the business, like someone who knows writing, someone who knows your genre is probably going to be able to give you a better critique than just some guy who doesn't like the fact that you write in first person. And that's the reason they gave you a 1-star review. I'm like, okay.
Reviews can really infuriate you, especially if it's those really dumb ones. Like, I didn't like this book because it was in first person. And I'm sure every writer.
And that's cool. I mean, it's legitimate. It's a legitimate review. They don't like it. That's cool. You can leave a review. But it's like, okay, well, I can't do anything about that. That's how I write.
If they bought it or borrowed it, I mean, that's cool. That's their choice to do, is leave a review. So
there you go. Okay, so great stuff. You promotion-wise, you do mailing lists, and you also get ARCs to some of these people on those mailing lists, just to get like a little bit of like momentum going when you launch. So that I think it's very intelligent to do. We're gonna move on to questions with the audience, because it's running on like 2 hours here. I'm like, people, these always go on longer than I intended. I mean, I was gonna say,
I knew going into this, I was probably going to be way too.
Like in my mind, I plan, it'll be an hour, right? This time it'll be an hour, and it's usually 2, maybe 3 sometimes. So I'm like, okay. So audience questions from the audience. We've got a couple here. And again, anybody who happens to be watching this live, you guys feel free to like drop some lines into the chat room. It's really good. We only have a couple people watching. Looks like we have 4 live viewers right now. We only really announced it like yesterday and like the day before that we're going to do this live. But it was so much fun the last time I did. I'm like, why not? You're just getting extra commentary from the audience. So if you're in the audience and you're watching live, feel free to drop your questions in the live chat. I will be happy to read them, even if they're just comments. So questions and answers that we collected from like Facebook and other places earlier. Reading in with Daniel Schienehofen, who asked, what power was the hardest for you to balance in your series?
I would say, I was trying to put a little thought into that. I'd say in book one, there's now powers. I mean, certain monsters like NPCs can have powers, and players can have powers, and there's the Hellions that have powers in book two. I'd say balancing the antagonist in book one, which was the White Weevil we discover, and balancing the White Weevil's powers was actually one of the hardest things, because I had to really kind of figure out how I wanted this creature to really work.
Right.
And I was like, well, I can't make them too powerful. They can't just be like this god mode creature that goes around just doing whatever.
He's a little OP when you first run into him, I think, in book one. Yeah.
Yeah, in book one, I mean, he's right there in the beginning, and he's this creature is really OP. And so balancing him, this creature, was kind of one of the difficult things for me. Everything else, I kind of try to just think of cool powers and be like, what would be a neat power? All right, that's okay. How can I do something better? And just try and do fun stuff with that. Like, it's really easy to be like, oh, this person can shoot red beams out of their hands, or this person can really shoot orbs or whatever. And that's okay if I need some throwaway characters, but like if there's a character that's going to stick around a while, or someone I want to use later, I'm like, all right, what would be a really neat power to give them that you don't see in DC and Marvel.
Yeah,
so,
that's hard to do, because there are so many powers in superheroes. They're hard to be super
already.
original. Like I noticed you gave one of your characters like a Spider-Man ability at some point through an item, and I'm like, okay, yeah, he's definitely going with the Amazing Spider-Man at that point. But I touch on the White Weevil. I think in book two, you balance them out a little more. Like there are definitely mechanics there that are explained. That says like, oh, this is his limiter. And like, okay, that makes more sense. Like,
there's a couple things I won't get into in book two about that specifically.
Yeah,
but there's reasons I needed to balance that, and I mean, even necessities of balancing that kind of helped me create kind of a guideline of what I wanted to do for other things.
And I think the thing about LitRPG in particular is that once you set your game rules, if you've done them right, it's the balancing is a little bit easier, because you have kind of these boundaries, like, oh, this is what's possible, this is what's not. And unless you're like magic wand waving something in your plot for some reason, those boundaries and those limiters kind of inform like where things can possibly go. Even if you're like creating a super high level character, it's like, oh, that's informed by their level and by these other restrictions, by their stats, and by the kind of items they can potentially get on raids or whatever. But there's still like actual guidelines saying, oh, this is possible, this isn't. And I think this also kind of informs Keegan Haas' question, is like, how do you deal with power creep? So I'm pretty sure pretty early on in book one, I say that, or one of the characters essentially says, the game's imbalanced, and the developers are fine with that, and everyone who's going into the game is fine with that. Video games in our modern world, we have esports. Those are very balanced games meant to be sports, fair, etc. And then you've got games that aren't so balanced. Maybe cookie cutter. An archer is always going to kill a melee. A spellcaster is always going to kill the archer. Etc. Things like that. In a superhero world, I just wanted to give people powers, and they kind of balance themselves by the people they surround themselves with. If I have, for instance, kind of trying to slowly get to the power creep answer, one character is able to make portals. Well, you can't hurt anything with a portal unless you portal something that falls and then portal it over their head and then, have... Close it.
So
yeah. I think we've all dreamt about ways to use portals to murder people.
Yeah, so you have to be creative with the powers you're given and utilize your surroundings and the people around you. Like, let's say I can create like a huge, bomb, but I can't throw it. Well, the portal guy and me now have a way to just destroy everything.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a combination of the people you surround yourself with, even if you yourself aren't, this incredibly powerful person. Now, going into the power creep issue, for Sigil Online, I kind of view, if you're level 1, you have, a flat amount of stats. And if you're level 50, well, you've gained more stats and you're able to kind of put them where you want to kind of fine tune yourself, because your powers utilize your stats for the damages they do. Now, I don't really get into the nitty gritty of how much, and me and Ramon have talked about this a lot, but I don't get into the nitty gritty of how much damage is happening, how much life is being taken. That's just my style currently.
That's cool. I mean, it's fine. You're consistent with it.
Yeah. So the stats are kind of a way of, okay, I've gotten stronger, but just because I'm stronger, I like to view it as Dark Souls. Dark Souls, a level 1 can beat the whole game through determination, time, and skill. Someone with level 1 can beat the entire game, but someone who's like a level 150 can beat it a little easier. And it's a matter of skill. And so I kind of utilize that in Sigil Online, where just because you have 50 levels on me, well, you definitely have an advantage, but depending on my powers, depending on your powers, there's going to be some discrepancy. So I don't balance it all that well between character and character. The stats are there. The stats make you stronger. And, if I hit you at level 1 with a punch, it's going to do practically no damage if you're a level 100. But if you can't hit me, or if I don't need to hit you, well, then that's like a whole different. So there's just all these different situations that the power creep just really isn't a huge issue, because I haven't made it an issue, essentially.
He's like, you kind of ignored it. I'm like, okay, power creep exists. Maybe like there are like real like things here, like, but
yeah,
it's fine.
It's there.
Yeah, that's one of those things about that, like not having damage locations. Like that. I mean, to me, like I'm a big math guy. I'm big on like creating formulas for Excel sheets that I use to like inform my damage applications, like your stat bonuses, your dexterity bonuses, wisdom and intelligence for like spell modifiers, like all that is automated for me. But like the damage are like for me an easy way of showing, oh, you're getting better. Like you pour all your stats into intelligence. Oh, your spell damage for your magic missile is going to be better up to a certain point. Right. Or into strength, like your short swing is going to be great. But and that to me is like a really easy way of showing that progression, because they're legitimate numbers. Like you can say, oh, he's hitting the rabbit for 2 points of damage. Oh, he levels up. He puts 4 points into strength. Suddenly he's doing double damage. He's doing 5 and 6, and the rabbit dies a lot sooner. And like that's to me a simple way of showing those progression. But I know for a lot of authors, especially authors who don't come from like the game side of stuff, where they're just authors, it's super hard. And it's super hard for them to grasp, like, oh, numbers are cool to put in there, and like levels and stats. And it's like, it's always so weird to me, because that to me seems like the easiest part of writing LitRPGs, like math. Yeah. Math is my friend. I'm okay with it, but not everybody is. Like, it's just weird.
I'd say that, your standard writer, author who isn't used to LitRPG, seeing all these numbers and just referencing all the numbers, to them, they've been ingrained that that's expedition, that's stuff that needs to be cut out. And for LitRPG, that's like the crack it's our bread and butter. You need. Yeah, bread and butter. So you've got to like retool your mindset essentially to write LitRPG. And for me, it has been a little difficult to give those nitty gritty details, because in my head I'm like, well, let's just skim some of this. I mean, they're affecting things, but I guess power creep more so for Sigil Online is the items I give people. Like you see in book 1 and book 2, Riley gets items that affect him and his powers.
Yeah, I think that's something that I love about you.
Things that really make him stronger. So he's not getting an item that increases his power by 50 and he's definitely stronger now. He's getting an item that modifies his power or increases what he can do in some way, streamlining things. And now he's stronger because things are different. and that comes in the form of items, powers, the tier that they are, which affects their powers, and the hard stats are kind of like the background that I don't get into too much.
Yeah, power creep is also a very interesting thing to do, because with any kind of RPG system, an RPG world, power curve is a thing. Whether it's going to be D&D or a video game, that power curve is part of the thing that we love. We love seeing people get more powerful, but at some point, they're so powerful that there's no challenge. And I think instead of seeing that as a detriment, see it as an opportunity for better storytelling, or for a different kind of storytelling. I think One Punch Man did that perfectly. The best OP character is One Punch Man, because he starts out in the story as the guy who can defeat anybody with one punch. So instead of focusing on that power curve, they focus on instead hit that effect of that being so powerful on his social life. His regular life isn't that different from any other kind of salaryman. And he has other concerns, and he's not famous. And there's a bunch of other ways of showing his character progression besides that straight punching power, I guess, at this point. So there are other ways to deal with it, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. But One Punch Man is such a great...
It is. And they're doing a second season. They have a second season, I think, coming out. I'm not sure if it's going to be this year or next year, but they are going to do a second season. So, yay.
But I love with One Punch Man how it's like, pretend that it's kind of like when you have a character and they're like super rich. Well, how does that affect your mindset? I mean, that normalization of things. So you have this character that can just kill anything in like a moment. Like, what's their drive? What do they do? What do they care about?
Right, because it shifts your drive.
Here's this monster that I could end in just a moment, but I want to know more about this monster before I kill it. Like,
it's very much a superhero. It's a Superman conundrum. Like, if you're all powerful, where is your growth at? And so they do it different ways, and like that's definitely awesome in that particular series, for me at least. But I think that's a really interesting way of dealing with power creep and being OP. Like that was probably the most original and interesting way of dealing with it from my point of view. And for folks, so One Punch Man is an anime and a manga. You can look them up on Amazon and Hulu, I think. They're there as well. So on to some more questions, though, from the audience. Jay Taylor asks, where do you get the ideas for Sigil Online?
We kind of answered that a little bit. Basically, just a little bit of everything that I consume. Video games. I mean, my Steam account's 800 games strong. So, and that's just Steam. So, games, movies, anime. I'll sit here and I've been really oddly listening to a lot of Nightcore on YouTube, which is just, slightly sped up regular songs and sometimes different vocals.
So music informs you for some of your stuff, really?
Well, it's some of the songs, certain lyrics, because some songs tell like parts of a story without telling a story. And so like a line of dialogue will just kind of resonate with me, and I'll be like, okay, let's incorporate that line into something.
That's kind of cool. Well, this is a side question, but have you ever read Giver Wathwick's stuff? He incorporates a soundtrack into his LitRPG story, in that each chapter has a song that goes along with it. And so he'll put up the soundtrack at the beginning of the story, but also he'll like a particular song for each chapter, so it's like a theme music for it that you can listen to while you're reading the story. So I'm like, I'm not as musically inclined as other people, so music is distracting for me when I read. But I love the idea that you have a soundtrack for your story.
Well, it's not so much a soundtrack for the story. It's about the content of the song. Then, I mean, I like how it sounds, sure, but it's like how it sounds doesn't really affect me as much as what the words are and kind of the emotion expressed in the words a little bit. So it's one of those things that I just, pull a little tidbit here and there, and that's a really good line. How can I contort that and insert it into a story? So we kind of talked a little bit about that, but
a lot like games and movies and everything else. So okay, let's see. Will there be a sequel to Grimoire Bound, also from Jay Taylor?
We just, I don't know if we talked that before the show started, but so I want to finish out Sigil Online if I can. Obviously we have Hellions coming out tomorrow, and I want to finish the Sigil Online story arc, and I already have ideas that I want to branch off from that, but I would like to go back to Grimoire Bound. I just don't know if it's going to be before or after I finish, or I'm not sure at what point after I finish Sigil Online. But yeah, Grimoire Bound ends on a bit of a cliffhanger.
It does. So
Unfortunately, I really should have planned that differently if I wasn't going to write the next one immediately. But
that's what you get with pantsing, man.
That's what I get with pantsing. Yeah. And Grimoire Bound had a bit of pantsing to it, even though I have a lot of the world kind of worked out. But anyway, it's definitely going to get more books.
Okay, perfect. One more question from Jay Taylor. Oh, mighty quest giver, give your fans a quest. Do you want to explain that to everybody?
Okay, so I'm not sure how that didn't come up prior to this. So I'll probably link this, wherever you put this video eventually, I'll probably link to it on Twitter or whatever. But so Dragon Con is a big convention. Generally, you know about it if you're, a geeky, nerdy type. But it's a huge convention in Atlanta, which is actually really close to me living in Alabama. It's like a 2-hour drive, super easy. And I really wanted to go to Dragon Con and cosplay as something, but I'm like, why would I want to just cosplay as, a character when I could be my own character? So I created this idea of the quest giver. So I had this great outfit, and I took like months to create, just little pieces here and there. And I went to Dragon Con and I was Jeff Sproul, the quest giver. And I had like a little sign saying quests available and stuff like that. And people would come up to me. Sometimes I'd have to like motion them over if they were looking and curious. And if I caught their, attention, I'd be like, yo, come over here. I've got quests. And I'd ask for the last picture they took on their phone. And if they showed me the picture, I had like a bag of like lollipops and I had glow sticks. So I had something that, most people are going to want. A glow stick, it's a convention, or a lollipop. A lot of people took lollipops.
Yeah.
I ran out of stuff pretty much by the end of the convention. I had like 900 lollipops, 900 glow sticks. I think I used about 700 of both. But so for all of Dragon Con, which was like 4 days long, I was this quest giver giving out quests of, what was the last picture you took on your phone? And do you want a bonus quest? Well, the bonus quest was always go find me a picture of something else, whether it was like somebody cosplaying a One Punch Man or Superman or Batman or whatever. I tried to make it a little difficult sometimes, and people would go find these other people at the convention, take a picture of them, come back to me, and I'd give them another reward. Which was usually just like 2 lollipops or 2 glow sticks or something. And it was fantastic. I loved every minute of it. My feet were sore. I was aching all over because I had like suspenders holding up all the things I was holding.
And I think part of the fun was like people trying to find you again. Because you weren't always in the same place. Like sometimes this is Dragon Con 2010 when a lot of LitRPG authors kind of hang out. We had a booth at Dragon Con. I met a bunch of great guys. Yourself included, but also Jay Taylor, who was there. And I know you sat in our booth for a little while, just kind of being a Where's Waldo, and people would come like walk by. I'm like, hey, you're the quest giver I was looking for before, and they come up to you. And but I know you also change locations that depend on the day, but you also give them clues like, oh, follow me on Twitter, and you can find out where the quest giver is. And it was also like a promotional incentive for like your presence. I thought that was just kind of fun all around.
Yeah, I had business cards that I probably have one sitting around here, but it's basically just like the quest giver, adventurer, questing, and like author too, and it would link to my Twitter and I think something else. And on the back of that card, I would write what they had to go find. So find me One Punch Man or Spider-Man or whatever, and I'd hand them the card. But I was always handing it to them upside down, so that all they saw was a white card. So that's probably all. But then I got to the point where I was like turning it over so they could see it, and be like, "Oh, hey, it's my promo card, and it also has what you need to find." So it was a fun promo tool that really probably didn't promo all that much, but some people did find me on Facebook and followed me and stuff like that. So
it was fun. I think a cool time like, okay, level 3 quest, your reward. Yeah. Hey, look, it's book.
Yeah. I think I got to like level 4 quests or something with like one person. Like they kept coming back, but yeah, people trying to find me, and then people coming up to me and they're like, "Are you the quest giver? Someone took a picture of me earlier." No,
that was fun too. Like your outfit became like your character, and I thought because I mean, this is a spoiler for people. I feature you in the LitRPG like video summary of DragonCon that I put together, all the videos I took because I had a camera. And like there are several occasions like some very scantily clad ladies would come up to you and be like, "Hey, quest giver, let's take a picture together." I'm like, oh, that's like the best move ever. Like your character is like good stuff, man.
Well,
I'm just saying.
I mean, there was just a ton of people who, I mean, I was talking. I mean, there's all kinds of people that were wanting to do quests, and it was great. I mean, oddly enough, there were like a couple people with like kids and stuff, and oh my goodness, kids at DragonCon are just like complete ADD and like hopped up on I don't know what, but like it was crazy. But yeah, there was I met a lot of awesome people, and I had no idea how it was going to go. I was worried that nobody would come up to me, and there were multiple times every single day, and sometimes most of the day that I had like a line of people waiting to talk to the quest giver, and I was just another con goer, just like the rest of them. They're like, "Oh, how many years have you been doing this?" "Oh, this is my first year."
Like, about a day.
Yeah, 3 days ago is when I started. Mm-hmm. So
I knew definitely a fun way to just have fun in the convention as well. It's getting dark where we are, so I'm going to move through some of these comments a little bit. Sarah Walk asks, "Men can be crazy cat ladies too." Now this is based on your Amazon author pick, which I really think you should update a little.
I should probably do that
because it's just you without any facial hair and the cat, and I'm like, okay, that's definitely setting.
It's not that long ago. That was a year ago.
Was it?
Yeah.
See, I can't grow facial hair, so for me, it feels like if you grow a beard, it's like 5 years worth of investment for me. So I'm like, I just assumed that's what it is for other people. Also,
for me, it's just me being lazy.
Annalise also says, Rini says, she wants to hear from the cat, based upon, of course, the same Amazon author picture, which I'll throw in on the edited version of this. So is there anything that the cat wants to say?
So the cat, the cat's name is Arby's. Okay. It's a guy. He was found at Arby's by an uncle of mine, and I adopted him after that. The cat's currently with a friend of mine, actually the other author of the Permadeath Legacy series. And so the cat's currently in Virginia, being taken care of by someone else right now. So I don't have him. It's a great cat, eats me all the time, chews on me, treats me like a toy, and so yeah, Arby's is not here to say anything.
Well, there you go. So my favorite version of Arby's is the cat, apparently, at this point.
Yeah.
So there you go. Okay, and that's kind of it for the author questions. That kind of ends most of this. I guess one last question for me would be, if you have any advice to give any other authors, let's say somebody who's considering being a writer, they're just starting out. What advice would you give somebody?
I would say that you can obviously read all sorts of information about how to write or what to write in a genre, and that's good and all. Definitely do your research, but your readers will be able to tell if you're not emotionally invested in your writing. If you're just writing something, to make $1, then your readers will feel it, and being able to write what you love and being able to make money from that. I mean, your readers are going to, feel the energy you put into your books. So find a genre that works for you and, is a good genre to be in general. And your readers are going to, see the energy you put into it. Definitely do your research on, you may love, the sounding of a genre, like, oh, I really want to write paranormal romance. Well, you should probably learn, what some of the fundamental things are behind paranormal romance or LitRPG before, diving in. Like, oh, I love Twilight or Supernatural. Well, a love for something, you still need to do a little bit of research. So definitely, if you're going to jump into a genre, do some research, see what's selling well, see what people are really enjoying, and if you love writing it, it's you got to stick with it. If book 1 doesn't work out, write book 2. Book 2 doesn't work out, well, did it do better than book 1? If it did, well, maybe you should write book 3. So
perfect. Great advice. Appreciate it. One comment from the audience is from Whale Saint Whale. Lies. Let the cat speak. That's the comment.
So. No cat here. Oh.
Meow. There you go. So There are some comments.
Well, thank you for interviewing me. Really appreciate it. So
Perfect. Now, anything else that I'm forgetting that you want to include? Any promotions or anything like that?
Tomorrow, Hellions will be out on Amazon. Hellions is the next book in the Sigil Online superhero LitRPG series. It'll be available on Amazon, so definitely check that out there. And I mean, all the other promo stuff, I will probably be doing a audiobook code giveaway for Paragons, which is the first book. If you follow me on Twitter or Facebook, it'll be there somewhere. So look for that tomorrow, because I need to get all my ducks in a row or whatever it is with that. So if you want to get a free copy of the audiobook for Paragons, follow me on Twitter.
So. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for your time. Of course, people can find you all kinds of places, including your website, jeffsproul.net, I think it is, right?
Yep.
Then we have patreon.com. You have a Patreon. People can support you directly, patreon.com/Jeff Sproul. You have a Facebook page, a Twitter page, Amazon author page. We'll have all the links to your novels and to your Goodreads page in the show for people to look at and click on and stuff. So there's a bunch of places they can contact you at to keep up with you, man. But thank you very much for hanging out with me. It was totally, I mean, the first time we met was at DragonCon personally.
Right.
But I had reviewed all your stuff as far as like LitRPG things. Not always favorable, but always, I think I enjoyed your writing in general.
You were honest, and that's, that's all I can expect.
But once I mentioned, I was like, oh, this guy's way too nice not to talk to at some point. And this was just kind of the opportunity to kind of reconnect, I guess, and chat. And because
next DragonCon.
Yeah, besides DragonCon, which I'm planning to go to next year for like a longer period. Like I'm actually going to get a hotel at one of the hotels in the con instead of like trying to Airbnb it, which was just doesn't quite work out as far as the partying goes. Because I think I stayed up way too late to.
And I was too sore for the partying. I just wanted to go to bed.
Yeah. So there you go. So hopefully we'll reconnect again to DragonCon, hang out again with a bunch of other people. But thanks for hanging out with me here, and for folks at home, if you just want to say goodbye real quick, we'll end the interview. Say goodbye to everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
For LitRPG Podcast, everybody, I am Ramon Mejia, and remember, folks, to go read some LitRPG, especially Hellions, when it comes out tomorrow. Goodbye, everybody.
See ya.